morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on the Inside NASCAR. I'm standing at the start-finish line of the famed Darlington Raceway, where the Trans-South Financial 400 NASCAR Winston Cup race rolls off here this afternoon. And this will be the final time that this will be the front stretch. They're going to flip-flop this track. They're going to move the front stretch to the back stretch to the front stretch. Dale Jarrett will lead a 43-car field off here this afternoon. He's won the pole here on Friday. Had a bush race here yesterday, and boy, was it an exciting finish. Randy LaJoie came home the winner. Let's go to our studios in Charlotte, North Carolina. Tyler Potter will take a look back at that race, catch us up to date on all the news, and preview today's race. Good morning, Tyler.
All right, Ned, thanks a lot, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Sunday edition of Inside NASCAR. All eyes are focused on the Darlington Raceway this weekend as the Busch cars ran there yesterday, and the Winston Cup regulars run the Trans-South 400 later today. The NASCAR family was saddened upon arriving in South Carolina on Friday by the news that Craftsman Truck Series driver John Nemechek passed away Friday morning at 11:30 a.m. Nemechek had been in a Miami hospital since last Sunday when his number 8 Chevy truck went into the turn 1 wall, driver's side first. The severe brain injuries that he suffered, along with the uncontrollable swelling, led to his untimely passing late Friday morning. When the news at Darlington hit, the racing seemed to take a back seat, as most everyone's thoughts were on the Nemecheks in South Florida.
Today, the whole fraternity is saddened by this event. John was a promising young driver coming up. The Nemechek family really has a commitment toward motorsports, and we're sorry to see that happen. The same feeling applies when anytime someone has a misfortune of losing their life.
I was probably the first one in the garage to put memory of John Nemechek on my race car. I'll tell you, I can't explain it. It's a bad deal. You know, I've interviewed a couple of times, and you know, I hate it for the series. I hate it for his family. We can't blame Homestead Motorsports facility. We can't blame NASCAR. We can't blame any other competitor. It's just one of those darn things that happened, and the same thing happened to Jay Sauter, and Jay was a little luckier than John. John was a fierce competitor. I think he had a bright future in this business. You know, his whole family was behind him 100%, and nobody in that garage area in the truck series, or this garage area over here for that matter, wanted to do good more than John. And it's just a terrible thing. It's an unfortunate thing. I've been pretty tore up about it. It's been a bad weekend.
Nemechek was 27 years old and is survived by his parents, Joe and Martha, and older brother, Joe.
Today's show is brought to you by Napa Auto Parts. At Napa, we keep America running. By Polaris, makers of 16 different ATV models, including the Sportsman 500. And by Miller Lite. With the great taste of an ice-cold Miller Lite, life is good.
Well, we're just a few hours away from the start of today's Trans-South Financial 400. We know Jeff Gordon loves to race at Darlington. He's won 3 straight times there. But what about Dale Earnhardt, who had to take a provisional just to make the field? Our Stephanie Boyd has been at Darlington all weekend long and has a report. Stephanie?
Well, Tyler, a lot of people are talking about the fact that the front and back stretches here at Darlington will be switched after this race, moving the start-finish line to the other side of the track. But the death of John Nemechek has overshadowed all of that, leaving one series regular noticeably absent. Joe Nemechek has not been behind the wheel of the Bell South Chevy this weekend after rushing to his brother's side late Thursday, just before John passed away. While Joe remains with his family in Florida, Phil Parsons is filling in, qualifying the number 42 machine 29th for today's race.
They called, said, you know, if they needed me, would I be available? I said, sure. So Mike came over Friday morning here at the racetrack and said that Joe had gone back down to Florida, that if I could, do they need me to step in? I said, sure. And I said, whenever Joe gets back, that'd be great.
Meanwhile, business had to continue at the track, where 4 teams were dealing with the ever-changing rules. Earlier in the week, NASCAR announced it would not give the Fords the extra 1/8 inch it allowed on the front air dams in Atlanta. They've also reduced the height of the rear spoiler on the Fords after wind tunnel testing following that race.
Making these changes to the rules, like you see, are for the reasons of close competition on the racetrack. And to make good rules, you have to have good information. We went to the wind tunnel after the Atlanta race, and the results showed that we needed to make some changes. And so here at Darlington now you can see the Fords had a small cut on the rear spoiler and a small cut on the front air dam.
You know, I drag raced a long time ago, and I went through a period of every race you had to adjust the rules depending on how fast somebody could go and what their circumstance was. And happily, when I got involved with Winston Cup racing 10 years ago, that was not the case, that you had to look race to race, and depending on the results, you could expect to be penalized for the next event. The 5-car, the Chevrolet car that they picked, was the same car that they tested a year ago when they went to the wind tunnel. And my understanding was exactly the same car. It didn't have different sheet metal on it. It should not have tested different. The 24 car was likely a better car. For whatever reason, even though they originally decided to take that car, they decided not to. The 25 car was probably a better car, and they didn't take that car. I think the result that they got in the wind tunnel gave them the excuse to do what they wanted to do. And as I said, it's with some sadness that I watched Winston Cup racing get to a point that we're expecting to have rule changes after every event, depending on what the result was.
NASCAR also announced that it's limiting all teams on their radio antennas and rooftop TV cameras, saying either device can affect aerodynamics. With the Trans-South 400 being the last race under the track's current layout, everyone is hoping they'll be the one to claim the last victory on this historic site. In qualifying on Friday, the guy everyone has been gunning for lately hit the bullseye once again. Points leader Dale Jarrett followed up his win 2 weeks ago in Atlanta by claiming the pole at Darlington.
We had a good test here last year before the Southern 500. That helped us a lot. We've got a really good organization right now. Things are going great. Todd and the guys give me great cars every week to come out of the box, and I think, yeah, it shows how good a team we have.
There were also a couple of surprises in qualifying. After failing to make the first 3 races of the season, Mike Wallace qualified the Spam Machine 17th. But the biggest surprise was that Dale Earnhardt's troubles continue as he qualified 39th and had to take a past champion's provisional. Darrell Waltrip also had some stressful moments before the lineup was complete. He qualified 41st and also had to take a provisional. The other provisionals went to Bobby Hamilton, Ward Burton, and Rick Mast, while Dick Trickle, Steve Grissom, and Billy Standridge all went home. And Tyler, one guy that a lot of people will be watching today is Jeff Gordon, who's won the last 3 races here at Darlington and starts today's Trans-South 400 10th. Back to you.
As Stephanie mentioned, Atlanta winner Dale Jarrett will lead the field of 43 to green for today's Trans-South Financial 400. Ricky Craven looks to get back on track. He'll start on the outside pole. Row 2 will be Bobby Labonte and Jeff Bodine, both of whom are looking for their first wins of the year. In the 3rd row, it'll be Roush teammates Mark Martin and Jeff Burton. Burton was 2nd in yesterday's Busch race. Martin was 4th. Row 4 will feature a pair of Fords, those of Hut Strickland and Ernie Irvin. And rounding out the top 10 are Sterling Marlin, who won the 95 race, and 3-time winner here, Jeff Gordon. It's been a strong season so far for the unsponsored Diamond Ridge Racing team of Jeff Green and Elliott Sadler. The highlight coming last week when Green won in Las Vegas. Could he make it 2 for 2? Let's take a look back at yesterday's Diamond Hill Plywood 200. For the 2nd straight week, a Diamond Ridge driver started on the pole. Last week it was Jeff Green who won the Las Vegas 300. This week it was teammate Elliott Sadler. The first of 7 cautions came out on lap 29. Tim Steele, who just took over full-time as driver for James Finch, is spun from behind by Mike McLaughlin. The number 4 Chevy, which was running 17th, suffers left front end damage and finished 37th. Roush teammates Mark Martin and Jeff Burton ran well all day long, battling each other for the early lead. It was a day to forget for pole sitter Elliott Sadler. 1 week after crashing in Las Vegas, Sadler crashed again, collecting with him Greg Sachs, bringing out the 6th caution of the afternoon. A few laps later, the number 29 car cuts a tire and is forced to pit during the 7th and last caution. Randy LaJoie's Chevy took over the lead with 54 laps to go, but he didn't seal the victory until the final lap. With LaJoie and Burton running 1-2, Burton drove his Ford to the low side on the back straightaway and made the pass. but as the two approached turn 3, momentum carried Burton up the track, enabling LaJoie to retake the lead and capture his second victory of the season by 0.2 of a second.
I'm just glad to beat Mark Martin. I mean, we finally beat Mark. He was still running at the end. Then they ship his teammate after us. What a great day for myself and this race team. Our sponsors, Pina and Kool-Aid. It was good. It was a good day, and they didn't give us much. We had to work for it.
Dick Trickle was third after finishing second last week. Mark Martin was fourth, breaking his string of 3 straight wins. Phil Parsons was fifth, his 6th straight top 10 finish in '97. Points leader Todd Bodine was 10th, and his lead over Phil Parsons is just 14 points. LaJoie's win moves him to within 53 points of Bodine. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, Ned will rejoin you from the number 10 shop of Phil Parsons. The Trans-South Financial 400 gets underway at 1 o'clock today, and as we leave you, here's a look at the rest of the starting grid for this afternoon's race.
Phil Parsons has been around NASCAR racing for quite a while. He's actually raced in the NASCAR Winston Cup Series and has a victory there. A couple of years ago, he started his own team to run the NASCAR Busch Series, got Channel Lock as the sponsor, and things have been going well, particularly in 1997. Going into the race at Darlington this weekend, he was second in the point standings after finishing in the top 10 in the first 5 races. So things are really going good for Phil Parsons in 1997. Glenn Jarrett files this feature on him.
Phil, let's start off with some fun stuff. First of all, you guys have gotten off to a terrific start to the 1997 season. Very consistent so far.
Well, we have, and it's really preparation. You know, we started this team last year, and we played catch-up, and we were behind for so long because, you know, we had to build all new cars. Basically, we built a shop over the winter of last winter, and so every race we went to for the first 4 or 5 races was a brand new car that we just had to finish that week. So, you know, this year we had our stuff prepared. We built some new cars. We built 3 new cars, but we had 3 cars from last year that we could fall back on. Our engine program with Ron Hutter was in really good shape. So I think preparation is the biggest thing.
Phil, from a standpoint as a team owner and the driver of that team, was there anything in particular over the winter that you guys talked about that you worked on that, like, hey guys, there's one area here that we really need to concentrate on, we need to improve on? What would that have been?
Well, I think you know, consistency. You know, we had some real good runs last year, but we were not as consistent as we needed to be. We ran up front most of the time, but not 100% of the time. And that's the thing we're trying to do this year is if we do our job, we run up front each race. You know, mechanically, you know, our guys have really done a super job with the Channel Lock Chevy. We never fell out of a race last year for mechanical trouble. So if we can continue that, if we can avoid the wrecks, then we're going to be around at the finish. If we run up front, we're going to have some good finishes.
Speaking of the wrecks, that seemed to be your biggest nemesis last year. It seemed like whenever a wreck happened, it was either right in front of Phil Parsons or right where Phil Parsons was. Not always, or very few times of your own making, but there are ways to get around that. One of those is to qualify better.
Yeah, that's one thing we really wanted to concentrate on, is to qualify better. We got a little bit behind over the winter, building a couple of new cars, and we wanted to do going to some racetracks and do qualifying runs for 2 days. But we got behind, we weren't able to do that, but our qualifying has improved a little bit this year. I think we've improved on our starting position from last year at every race we've been to so far, I think with the exception of Daytona, which is a whole deal on it by itself. But that's one thing we really want to work on, and we're going to work on real hard. But, you know, we've got a little bit more of an influx of money with some good associates. We have Honeywell on board, Willard Home Products, and that's really helped with the preparation, which again filters down throughout the whole program.
Phil, to the best of my recollection, you are the only driver that started in the NASCAR Busch Series, I guess back in 1982, started in its first full year, that's still running in the series. Now, you left and did some Winston Cup racing for a while, but you're one of the old pros, one of the veterans in this series, and some of the things that you have learned during that time, I see Phil Parsons as a much more patient race driver. You're going to wait for your chance to come along now rather than try to force it to come.
Well, I think so. You know, when I first started racing, it was, you know, either pass them when you came to them or knock them out of the way. That was my philosophy, and I did that for a long time. But these races, number one, you know, they're obviously longer races. We have a lot of 300-mile races now, and the competition is so substantial that, you know, any given day there literally are 15, 20 cars that can win the race. And I'm not talking about just when you have an influx of Winston Cup people. I'm talking about the Busch regulars now are top to bottom so far superior to what they used to be that it's really, really tough. But the thing is, you have to be patient. You have to be around at the finish, and it took me some time to realize that. You know, I can look back at my record and say, man, I would have had a good finish here. You know, if this hadn't happened, that hadn't happened. Again, not always of our own making, but sometimes you stick your nose in a hole that, you know, you think about it a little bit. Maybe you shouldn't have done that. But we try to be smart. I've got a real good team of spotters up top that keeps me level-headed and tries to remind me of the big picture. Hey, we got to get to the front, take them one at a time, and so I think that helps.
You touched on the very next point I was going to raise, and that is about the championship. You're sitting in a good position now with the outlook that you have, stressing consistency and finishing races. You got to feel like that you're a threat for that title. You got to feel like, too, that the experience that you have had in this series, much more than most of these other guys here, has got to help in the long run.
Well, I hope so. But again, you've got some awfully strong guys that we have to race for that championship. You've got, obviously, Randy LaJoie, who won last year, so you know he knows what it takes. And you've got Ty Bodine that's been in the championship hunt before. Mike McLaughlin has been in the top 5 3 times. And then there's other guys, Jason Keller and Elton Sawyer. So you got some guys that's going to make it very, very difficult. So we hope to, you know, if we can continue doing our job, that's run up front, finish races, and get some good finishes, then hopefully when we get down towards the end of the year, we'll be in position to think about it.
Last week, we had a story on the Rainier Walsh racing team and all the things they have going on in motorsports. And one of the things is they have a NASCAR Winston Cup team that Greg Sachs drives for. They also have a NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series team, and Toby Porter is the driver for that. And they're very high on Toby, think that he has a bright future in the sport. Stephanie Boyd has his story.
At the ripe young age of 22, rookie Toby Porter has one of the most enviable rides in the Craftsman Truck Series. The former All-Pro standout was tapped last year by veteran Winston Cup owner Harry Rainier to drive the Hardee's Ford this season for Team Rainier Walsh.
It kind of caught me off guard there at first, but it was great. I mean, that's a good thing. At least you know you've been doing something right, trying to get there, so it was good that he did. It made me feel real good.
Were you overwhelmed at all?
Yeah, I was. I mean, I was stunned there at first. I was like, man, I told my dad, I said, you ain't gonna believe who just called. We was all real happy about it. It was great.
And things have only gotten better since. Driving in the Truck Series has been a far cry from Porter's All-Pro days, where he was both the driver and the boss.
It's a lot of difference. There's, as far as not owning anything, I mean, for the last 3 or 4 years I've been running All-Pro. Me and my dad's owned everything. Never really had no big sponsor. Had to do it all out of our pocket and all. Was really lucky to do what we did for the money we had. So it's been a big change. I mean, I come up here and start driving for these guys, and there's no pressure. I remember I used to go to work every Monday morning having to worry about how I was going to pay my bills that I spent buying tires past weekend. But it's great. I mean,
does that change the way you drive? I mean, probably before, if you owned your own cars, you were always thinking about, oh, I got to save this or I got to save that because it's got to run the next time.
Exactly. I used to take it easy sometimes when I shouldn't. And not now. I can just kind of go out there and race and not worry about it.
For most drivers, not worrying is easier said than done, especially with the level of competition in the Truck Series. Porter found out the hard way when he failed to qualify for last week's truck show at Homestead. But in his first race at the season opener at Walt Disney World, Porter qualified 4th and was a contender at Tucson before finishing 11th.
I went to Tucson and I had on my mind I was going to win the race. I was going to win it, so that's the way I feel. I mean, I've got such a good team, and I feel like I got the equipment to win races, so I feel like I'll win a couple by the end of the year. That's what I'm hoping anyway. I feel that confident with all the guys and the team.
And the team is just as confident with Porter. They're grooming him for Winston Cup, maybe even running some races this year as a teammate to Greg Sachs.
He is our future here. Along with Greg, eventually we would like to run a two-car team. Toby is just all through testing. We've got all new equipment over there. He's just done a fantastic job. He's done everything we've asked him to do. So we're looking for some good things out of Toby this year.
A little over a year ago, before Harry and Lauren called you, you're sitting in your all-pro shop working on your cars with your dad. Did you ever in a million years imagine that you'd be in the kind of position you're in now?
Never would. I've always dreamed of it and always hoped, but I didn't know. I talked to a few people who'd been running good, and I felt like something was going to turn around, but I've been hoping for 2 years, and it still hasn't. And just all of a sudden, they called me, and now here I am in this. So it was great. I mean,
And now that you're here, where do you think you can go with this?
I don't know. I believe I can go on. I mean, I really do. I'm gonna do some testing in the Winston Cup cars and all this year, so I feel like we're gonna go to the top.
Thank you, Stephanie. The next race for the NASCAR Winston Cup drivers and teams will be in 2 weeks at the new Texas Motor Speedway. The Interstate Batteries 500 on April 6th, and the Busch cars will run there on April the 5th in the Coca-Cola 300. And many of the drivers in both series have been out there testing that new speedway, and we'll have a story on it when we come back. So don't you go away.
I think when it's all said and done, everybody gets tired of picking it to death, it's going to end up being a lot like Charlotte. Yeah, it's tight off of turn 4, but so is Charlotte. I mean, if you go to that racetrack coming out of turn 4, you get right out next to the wall there. It's a little tight off of 2, but it's not bad. I really don't have a problem with the racetrack. I hate they have a problem with their paving up there. That makes everybody kind of skeptical, but I think overall it's going to be just fine.
Well, I come out here for the truck race last year and, done pretty good. So I said, I can do even better when I come out here this time, and put some money on the table and lost all I was going to lose the first night, and just go with that.
You won't tell us how much.
I ain't going to say how much.
This is my first time gambling in Las Vegas, and I won up $100 so far. So we lost one race car, lost one engine, but we're up $100.
Slot machines, it's a win or lose situation. Unfortunately, I've always been real lucky on slot machines. I've won a little bit there, and I had a guy that with me that's never been here before, and I kind of showed him and won him $350, so that helped out quite a bit.
My first time in Vegas, we usually come out here for the Super Bowl weekend, and have enjoyed coming out there every time we came. And favorite game, I guess, was Caribbean Stud, and lost a lot of money.
Phil Parsons was among a number of the NASCAR Busch drivers who stopped off on their way to Las Vegas to test at the new Texas Motor Speedway in preparation for the Coca-Cola 300, which comes up there on April the 5th. It also was an open test session for the NASCAR Winston Cup drivers for them to prepare for the Interstate Batteries 500, which comes up at that new speedway on April the 6th. And our Tyler Potter was there as well and files this report.
The first of 2 new races in '97 is here at the Texas Motor Speedway for the Interstate Batteries 500. Now, the race isn't until April 6th, but when the track opened for March testing, Busch and Winston Cup drivers were eager to hit the 1.5-mile super speedway.
It's a fast racetrack.
Give me some other impressions of it.
It's a fast racetrack.
I haven't been on this kind of smooth racetrack in a long time.
At first glance, the Texas Motor Speedway looks like Charlotte, but after talking to a handful of drivers, we found they agreed to disagree.
A little bit like Charlotte, we came here, and when we pulled into the place, the garage area, the fencing, and the track is the same configuration as Charlotte does, but when you get out there, it's a lot different.
Talked to Mark Martin a little bit, who was the only one that had been on the racetrack. He did the tire test for Goodyear, and he said it, wasn't Charlotte.
It's a little tighter in the front chute than Charlotte, but it's so close to Charlotte. Very smooth, fast, and going to be another pretty place when we come back.
To me personally, it's a fast Rockingham.
It's a miniature Daytona, really. We've been able to flat-footed just about all the way around this racetrack, and kind of like Daytona and Talladega.
It's very similar to Charlotte, but it's a little bit treacherous right now because there's only like one groove on the bottom, and above that it's a lot of dirt on the track and a new pavement, so it's a little more like Darlington in some ways because you got only one groove right at the bottom that you got to hit. So.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me more of Vegas than it does of Charlotte because the bankings don't seem quite as steep, and the way that you get into the banking seems a little different.
You know, I think when it's all said and done, everybody gets tired of picking it to death, it's going to end up being a lot like Charlotte.
I don't know if it's similar to any track. I mean, it's kind of its own different deal.
The track's configuration was very much on the mind of Dale Earnhardt, who blasted the layout in last week's Dallas Morning News, saying, quote, they didn't think about making a great racetrack so they could run great races. Adding later, with this configuration of a racetrack, I don't want to run here but once a year.
I don't owe anybody an apology. The corner still falls off, and it's still treacherous getting in one. Nothing's changed from what I said yesterday, but that's my opinion, and everybody's got an opinion. I'm not bad-mouthing their racetrack. They got a beautiful racetrack, beautiful garage area, beautiful facility. It'll be nice to race on.
A couple drivers who found the going rough in testing were Robbie Gordon and Johnny Benson. Both of them crashed.
Well, I touched the wall off turn 2. I wrecked in the backstretch, but it's one of them deals, I guess. It's trying a little too hard too early, and I got a little just touch high, and the track drops off, and I got into a push, and it's my fault, you know, bumped the wall, and I lost it.
One of those deals, you go out here and run, and you try to qualify or try to run fast without, without a lot of laps on the track. It's going to bite you, but I got a little loose and saved it and had it saved, but then got up in the marbles and lost it again. So, things happen.
Gordon wasn't alone on the difficulty of turn 1.
Probably the most challenging thing right now is getting off into one. There's a pretty good transition from the flat to the banking, and everybody I talk to seems to be struggling with it, except for a few guys that maybe have a little bit different shot combination to get through there.
Well, getting into 1 and 3, it's just, we're going so fast at these places now, and you're not wanting to lift just a little bit, so you got to really get the cars comfortable getting in the corner. Basically the same thing we fought at Atlanta, and the same thing we'll fight at Charlotte and places like that, but it's no different. It's asphalt and 4 corners.
For the teams that were there, the time was invaluable for testing out different cars in the hopes of finding the perfect setup.
We probably picked up a second from how we went on the racetrack the first time, or the speed we ran the first time. We picked up a second throughout the course of the day, so that's a second that we won't have to learn when we come back here. So now hopefully we can maybe get another half a second on top of what we've already learned, and then we'll be right in the ballpark. We're right in the ballpark right now, so it's just a matter when we get back, and we'll see how, with all the cars here, see how fast they can go and see what we stack up.
Well, it helps a lot, especially with as little track time as I've had in the Busch cars. This is only my 13th race, and knowing that we tested good here, we did the same thing in Atlanta. We went down and tested real quick, and then came back and got the pole, so hopefully we can do it again.
The biggest thing is you got to kind of what if we had a day like we had yesterday and you got no track time, and then you had an hour of practice and you had to go qualify. That's what you worry about at a track like you have nothing absolutely to compare to, no data. So you really need some track time here just in case something happens that we can't do anything about when we come back down here. Maybe you get here and you had an engine problem or something happened to the car and you didn't get very much practice time. This will be very helpful.
And if this race needed any more hype, Dallas Cowboy quarterback Troy Aikman was on hand to voice his support.
I'm looking forward to it, and the whole city is really. It's unbelievable, the enthusiasm. Of course, it's not any surprise to those people that follow NASCAR in other parts of the country, but I think it's been long overdue to come here to Texas, and I'm excited that it's finally getting here.
Thank you, Tyler. Boy, we can't wait to get out there and see some racing on that new 1.5 mile super speedway. Coming up, the mailbox and lots more right after this break. The Inside NASCAR mailbox is brought to you by Miller Lite. Our question today is from Richard Melvin from Cleveland, Ohio. What is the purpose of placing ice into a pressure cylinder connected to the radiator prior to a race?
My name is David Evans. I'm Chief Engine Builder of the number 44 Hot Wheels Pontiac. Richard, this is a pressurized water tank. It has 2 purposes. first of all, it's used before qualifying. We pack it with ice and water so the water's really cold, and we connect it to the radiator and cool the engine down before qualifying because we block the front nose of the car up completely. The car is more aerodynamic with the nose blocked up completely. So with the cold water, the car is able to run 2 laps without overheating. Its second purpose is used on pit road. During the race, if we have an overheating problem during the race, when the car comes in for a pit stop, we can take this hose, which has a quick disconnect, plug it onto the radiator, and fill the engine back up with water again without taking the radiator cap off. That's the 2 purposes used for the pressurized cooling tank. And thanks for writing in, Richard. I hope this answers your question.
If you have a question for the Inside NASCAR mailbox, write to us at Inside NASCAR. Post Office Box 240417, Charlotte, North Carolina 28224. If we use your question on the air, you'll receive this embroidered Miller Lite jacket and a cap and shirt from Chase Authentic, the authentic trackside apparel of NASCAR.
You probably know that NASCAR racing is a very high-tech sport that requires highly educated team members, people with sharp skills and knowledge. At Inside NASCAR, we recognize that and have always been interested in supporting education, especially for our junior race fans. We have a special educational project that we're involved in and would love to hear from teachers, educators, or even parents about racing being used to teach students. This can be about any subject.
If you're involved in an educational program that uses racing to help teach students or know someone who is, please let us know about it by writing to Inside NASCAR Racing and Education, 4205 K Stewart Andrew Boulevard, Charlotte, North Carolina 28217.
It's time now for a short break. Still to come, a story on all the changes being made at the Atlanta Motor Speedway, and there's more too on this edition of Inside NASCAR. We'll be right back. One of the big stories at Darlington, South Carolina this weekend is some changes that are being made to the track before they go back there for the Mountain Dew Southern 500 in September. They're going to flip-flop the front to the back. Basically, they'll move Doyle Ford, the flagman, from what is now the front stretch over to the back stretch. No big deal. But the Atlanta Motor Speedway has much bigger plans. They're going to flip-flop it, okay, the front to the back, but they also are going to change the configuration of the racetrack. And there are mixed reactions on that decision. Brett McMillan has the story.
When Dale Jarrett took the checkered flag at Atlanta, it was a win for the history books. This year's Prime Star 500 was the last race run on Atlanta Motor Speedway as we know it.
Let me show you why things are going to be different in Atlanta. What you're looking at has been the backstretch. But when the drivers and crews come back here in the fall for the season finale, it will be the front stretch. Where we're standing will be the end of pit road. And where the new stands are, there's going to be a double dog leg, making the track resemble Charlotte and Texas. Well, as you can imagine, the crews are going to be looking at a completely different track. So most of them are having to save it testing for when they come back here in the fall.
It's in our mind. You know, it's a season finale, and we could get down to the end where it could be, 2-3 positions in the point standings in the final. The way my test schedule has gone, we looked at it, well, we might hold one back.
We will test at least one car here out of our 3 cars. And Atlanta's been hit and miss for us. Sometimes we run pretty good at Atlanta, and other times we'll miss it. So I'm not really apprehensive about the change. We'll come down, test it, and probably have as good a prospect as we'd otherwise have.
Jack Roush brings up something that's become a sticking point for many. See, NASCAR allows the Winston Cup teams only 7 test dates during the course of the year. But for guys like Roush or Rick Hendrick, who have 3 teams, smart management of those dates and sharing of information bumps that total to 21. For Robbie Yates and Richard Childress, it's 14. That advantage leaves single team owners like Jeff Bodine fuming, especially this year.
What we're trying to do, though, is because we have 2 new tracks and a new track here when they redo it, we're trying to get NASCAR to drop those tests that count against us. If they don't, we're going to be testing 3 less times somewhere else where we need to be, and then that's where the multi-car teams come into play. They have the advantage. They have more tests available for them as a unit, and we hope NASCAR addresses that problem and helps us independent guys out, single team owners out, and waives the tests on those 3 tracks.
When you think about what's at stake in each of those 3 races, you can understand why testing is so important. At Texas and California, they'll be working to earn that first that no one can ever take away, the first to win. The next Atlanta race is the season finale. The points championship will likely remain undecided, and spots at the head table in New York will be on the line. But odds are we won't remember the first winner on the new Atlanta layout like we'll remember the first to take the checkered flag to Texas and California, or like we remember Jeff Gordon's win in the first Brickyard race. And Dale Jarrett's win in the final race on the Atlanta Oval won't be recalled with the same emotion as Gordon's triumph in North Wilkesboro's last hurrah. Maybe that's because they know they'll be back.
The only thing I'm not going to miss is the speeds that we're going here, but they're going to like make us go faster. So, you know, that's something that I don't think we need, because you know the human body can only withstand so much G-forces, and you know, if we wreck here, we're going to see how much we can withstand.
I wish I wouldn't change it. I just finally got the handle of it. You know, I've raced here for, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years now, or never could get the handle of this place. I finally figured it out. Now they're going to change it, so maybe it'll be better for the better. Maybe I'll get a hold of the second racetrack I can build here a little quicker than this first one.
That's what most teams will be trying to find out when they return to Atlanta before the November finale.
In 1950, most of the Major League stock car races were held on short dirt tracks in the South. But in that same year, businessman Harold Brasington saw his dream of building a super speedway in Darlington, South Carolina realized with the very first Southern 500. That first race was won by Johnny Mance, who drove his winning Plymouth to the track on race morning. The winner's biggest competition that day was Fonnie Flock, whose uniform consisted of Bermuda shorts. In 1985, Bill Elliott became the first and only driver to win the Winston Million. He did it at Darlington. In Victory Lane, he was trying to imagine what $1 million was.
No, I can't. I've seen it, and they stated up at Charlotte, but, you know, half a race, I feel like that the car, I was doing all I could do in the car, just wasn't right, but I kept on running and kept on running. I kept cool, and I stayed out of trouble, and it all turned out.
In 1987, Dale Earnhardt was the winner in the Trans-South 500.
I caught Bill just right when he went in the corner down there and behind some slow traffic. And I seen I was going to catch him, and I went in the corner a little hard and got a little high and got in the loose stuff and hit the wall, and thought, oh, this is the end of this. And so I just had to drive the car as straight as I could and try to run second, and I'll be doggone, old Bill run out of gas on the last lap. And we could come coasting around there more or less, and got by and won the race. It was just, you know, it was a lucky day.
And in 1988, Lake Speed took his first and only Winston Cup victory.
A big relief. I tell you, I feel like I got a weight off my shoulders the size of the world, you know, and it's just been one of those things that I know I shouldn't have had it, and I know I shouldn't have been carrying it, but it was one of those things that was hard not to pick up when you've been racing since you was 13 years old, and it won the kind of things that I'd won before I came into this division. It's been real frustrating to take so long to do it, but as my sweet sister had always told me, that if it was easy, you wouldn't like it.
Since 1950, many drivers have tried to beat the Lady in Black, but few have. Imagine trying to race at a track with the nickname Too Tough to Tame.
Well, the NASCAR Winston Cup drivers and teams are off next weekend, but the Busch Series will be at Hickory, North Carolina. And here's what we have for you right here on TNN on Inside NASCAR next week.
With 4 races in the books, Dale Jarrett finds himself atop the Winston Cup point standings. More amazing might be the fact that he has dominated getting to the top, but only has 1 win to show for it. Jarrett has led more than half of the laps that have been run and shows no signs of letting up with his second-year Robert Yates team. We'll talk to the early season dominator coming up. Now that the drivers in both the Winston Cup Series and Busch Series have had their first look at the new Texas Motor Speedway, we thought we'd give you a sneak peek at the newest NASCAR racing facility. Track General Manager Eddie Gossage will give you a look at what to expect when you enter the gates in 2 weeks. Following the race at Rockingham, Loy Allen and TriStar Motorsports parted ways after a multi-year marriage. But the young driver has not given up the wheel totally. Loy has decided to focus on the Busch Series on a limited basis, and we'll talk to him about his plans for the remainder of 1997. All this and more next week on Inside NASCAR.
The sponsors, the public relations people, they don't miss a trick today in racing for an opportunity to get a message across. Take the helmet, for example. Back when I drove race cars, we had just a plain old gray helmet that we put on the head just to protect our head. Didn't tell a message, but look at this. Today, helmets are designed by artists. There are a number of them in the sport to make the driver look good and, of course, to get a message across for the sponsor. And that is the subject of this week's Inside NASCAR Profile.
Started, I was working on some teams and they needed some helmets painted, so I painted helmets in California and when I was racing shifter carts. And I painted their helmets and then went for a dry spell, worked on a few teams, and then in November of '95, it really took off.
Now Sean designs helmets for 16 Winston Cup drivers and 4 Busch drivers. No one does more helmets for the Winston Cup circuit than Rogers, who also airbrushes helmets for the NHRA and Craftsman trucks.
But on 90% of the helmets, they just, here's the colors of the car and here's what needs to be wear. And they let me go for it. So 90% of the time, they don't know what they're going to get until they see it.
The 10 days before Daytona are usually the busiest for Sean. This year he did 20 helmets, but he also turned 20 away. Each helmet takes about 2 days to complete and costs around $325. 2 drivers have trademarks, Jeff Gordon, who has the feathers on his helmet, and Dale Jarrett has raindrops on his. As for Sean's favorite?
The Spam helmet. It's got a granite base, blue on top, and it's peeling back, kind of like it's blue metal.
Most challenging?
Probably Jeff's, the Indian headdress helmet. I call it the Warrior, I guess because of the Rainbow Warriors. But I saw the Indian, the wooden Indian in the shop, and I said, man, I got to put that on the helmet. And I was just bouncing around how I was going to do it.
How about most symbolic?
That would definitely be Dale Jarrett, the Darlington helmet. With the Winston Million, yeah. That was the first helmet that actually had a theme and a purpose. The funnest one I did, I think, was the Pink Panther or the wood helmet that I did for Brett Bodine last year. Did one for, was a Southeast wood treating, and it looked like wood, and I've gotten the most comments out of any of the helmets I've done was that one. And then the other one I did was for Owens Corning, and they have the Pink Panther, so I did it like Kilroy, how Kilroy always did the thing with the nose. I did the Pink Panther looking over the Owens Corning logo, so it was kind of neat.
Well, that's all the time we have for this show. We hope you enjoyed it. Our thanks to Phil Parsons and all the folks here at the Channel Lock Racing team for allowing us to show you around their shops. You join us again here on TNN for more on Inside NASCAR.